Hello. I am Maria Vaz, and I am the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Lawrence Tech. And I would like to welcome you all tonight to our Presidential Symposium. This is a tradition that we started 5 years ago when our new president, Dr. Vrinder Madgal, came to Lawrence Tech. And this tradition is, and this seminar or this symposium is always about technology and how technology can and influences our society in many different ways. So every year there is a college that is in charge of finding the right theme for the symposium. And so this year was the College of Architecture and Design. And so today we have the pleasure to welcome you here. And I would like to introduce our president, Dr. Vrinder Madgal.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. You can all hear me, right? Well, thank you very much for coming. This is a very important occasion for all of us. Dr. Ward mentioned that about 5 years ago, so we had a panel on the thematic area. Each time we have one by one topic. And we have for a theme around which we have the eminent speakers and experts talk about the area and both inform us and alarm us if there are areas we should be. I think you could hear me, right? Thank you. So actually what I was going to say, Dr. Waz has already covered. So what is that I'm going to do? First, welcome formally to you. We're very delighted you're here. We have an excellent set of panel. The panel brings to fore the technology that is contemporary. I like to bring it to the fact that when I go home sometime in New York to see my daughter, my grandson knows more technology than I do, and he teaches me. Similarly, our professors, maturity and wisdom helps us, but also the technology moving so fast that what you will see, the contemporary nature of technology, which we're very blessed with our speakers. An additional issue is the College of Architecture and Design is one of the eminent colleges of this university, and also it has a place in the area for many things. If you are Michael Jackson or Frank Sinatra, you come to Oakland County on Oakland County Airport, private jet, designed by Lawrence Tech graduate, architecture graduate. If you have a lot of money, you go to Somerset for shopping, designed by Lawrence Tech graduate. If you're a baseball fan, you go to Comerica Park, designed by Lawrence Tech graduate. If you like to travel, go to China, the tallest building, designed by Lawrence Tech graduate. On and on. Then we have a design center in Midtown, which is also a place where we can involve men and women and students particularly who cannot travel or have no means to come to Lawrence Tech. They can go there, take classes, be participant in seminars and retreats and so forth. So College of Architecture and Design plays a very vital role for us. But today, they are bringing to fore for us an area that needs our attention. For example, it is nicely said here in the brochure, humanity is acquiring all the right technology for all the wrong reasons. What you see in North Korea, what is going on, all over the world, people blowing up, and that's technology, whether they use cybersecurity or what have you. But these are technology misused for wrong reasons. But our title is very nice because inclusive technology seeking to do good. We are a private university for public good. With that, I'm very happy you're here, and I welcome our very esteemed panel who will deliberate for you the ideas that really attest to the title. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to do this from the podium because I think we also have a number of people joining online. So welcome to everybody that's also joining us on the simulcast. My name is Carl Dobman, and I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design. The College of Architecture and Design is excited to be hosting the President's Symposium series this year. How many people drive a car with a manual transmission? There's a lot of them. So I want to use that as an analogy today as we discuss technology and use the 4 stages of learning any new skill. So if you can think back to when you started to learn how to drive a 5-speed or 6-speed transmission, it's called unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know yet. As you start to gain in the skills, the next stage is called conscious incompetence. This is that you start to realize that you don't know things. And it comes with some frustration for a while. Then the 3rd stage is consciously competent. At this point, you know what you know. And then the pinnacle of this is unconsciously competent. We know many people that can use different tools, different techniques. They don't even have to think about it. These are often not the best teachers because they can't articulate what it is to use those things or to explain to others how to use those things. But if you think back to the first time you were driving a stick and sitting at a stoplight on a slight incline with a car that's parked right behind you at the stoplight, there's a whole bunch of apprehension that comes with that. But if you fast forward to where you are now, many of you probably don't even remember shifting on your way to school today. It's something that you no longer think about. So I want to use that notion of shifting gears as a means of discussing technology. In many instances, or in the best case, technology occurs seamlessly in our lives. We don't think about it. We don't pause to think about the impact that this technology might have on us. We don't consider the impact technology might have on our interactions with others, or even who we might be interacting with. The topic of inclusive technology grows out of conversations that our faculty were having about how we differentiate ourselves as a technological university that engages design. Our mission is not only to educate our students on what types of tools they might be using in practice once they graduate, but to give our students an agenda or an attitude about the role of technology. Professor June Kim was in this meeting and discussed the fact that everyone was using technology in urban design, but that his agenda was to be helping communities in Detroit. The technology was deployed with empathy, and I think we'll see that about our panelists this evening. It's this overlay or technological agenda that initiated the conversations about inclusive technology that we're going to have this evening and how we might be leveraging technology to do good. So to simply be shifting gears unconsciously at that high stage of knowledge is not the goal of this roundtable discussion tonight. Instead, I would challenge us to downshift through consciously competent to consciously incompetent. In this stage, we begin to understand the things we don't yet know, put ourselves in a state where we're aware that we don't know everything, and we challenge ourselves to see things in a different way. Today is not a conclusion to a conversation, but the start of a conversation. Today should lay the groundwork for us to engage in broader, cross-disciplinary discussions about what we are doing. Today is also an opportunity to use technology to create disciplinary bridges, to open up possibilities for new types of projects and new forms of multidisciplinary research. Specifically, this is an important aspect in a small university where the notions of silos is counterproductive. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and it's my pleasure to introduce Lillian Crum, the moderator for this evening.
Okay, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Dr. Modgill. Thank you, Carl Dobman, for the introductions. My name's Lillian Crum. I'm an assistant professor of graphic design, and I'm the director of graphic design and interaction design in the College of Architecture and Design here at Lawrence Technological University. I'll be the moderator tonight. We're really excited to have our 4 panelists to share their insights on the topic of inclusive technology. I'd like everybody to be involved, though, as an audience. Our objective here is to share our thinking about the role of technology in bringing us together and how we can pursue the positive role that technology can have on our society. So to give you an idea of the structure of this evening, momentarily I'll give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves more in depth about what they do to give everybody more context. After that, we'll move into the discussion. During the discussion, I'll invite you, the audience, to ask questions to our panelists. So each of you should have a card. Does anybody not have a card? If you don't, if you wave your hands in the air, I'm sure a card will appear in your hands momentarily. Please write your questions on the card during our conversation. They'll be collected and then delivered to me for our audience questions. So our 4 panelists tonight, we have Mercedes Main. She's the CEO of Oso Technologies, the company behind the product PlantLink, which turns us all into more of a green thumb by helping us connect to and take care of our plants.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So, as I said, my name is Mercedes Mane. A little bit of a timeline here of where I started, at least where I started in U.S. and where I am right now, and then just to give you guys a little bit of an idea what I do, and you can ask me a little bit more pointed questions later. So I'm originally from Albania, a little tiny country in Europe. I grew up in Italy, though. My parents moved there when I was a little kid. And then in the year 2000, I got a chance to come to the United States as an exchange student for a couple of years. And then I decided to stay here for college. I went to Purdue for my undergraduate degree. And then after that, I moved to the neighboring state, Illinois. Really like the Midwest. And so I worked for a couple of small companies in town there until I decided I wanted a little bit more, punishment. I went for a master's degree in aerospace engineering. And while I was in school, I got this itch inside of me that, I just wanted to do something that was a little bit, bigger than me. So I decided to go and build an electric car. We actually, with a group of friends, we built an electric vehicle, 3-wheeled electric vehicle. It took us about 3 months. We built it in my garage, and then we drove it to the engineering open house that winter. It was my first company on our own, and it was, as anything, the first thing that you do is probably going to fail, and it failed miserably as a business. But it did get me involved into other activities. I mean, I did, that same year we started a fab lab, and through that I learned a little bit more about technology and digital fabrications, and gained enough skills and confidence to think that I could sell those skills to other people. So I started a consulting company doing product development. So that company, I started that with my partner in life and a couple of friends. It's called the Product Manufactory, and then cool background story here, that building up there that says the Product Manufactory actually built by another architect from Lawrence Tech University. So it actually was built here, and they moved it in a truck to Urbana, where they actually installed it. It's pretty cool. It's a conference room on wheels. How many casters? 24 casters. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so it's so we have in Urbana now, we have this product development firm that we launched 5 years ago, 9,000 square feet. We do we have engineers, designers, makers, builders, and we have projects in there that are from small startup people that come in with just barely an idea, to big companies like Whirlpool and P&G and Molex. And for those companies, for the big ones, you might think like, why would they work with us? Actually, their R&D firms are constantly looking for outside influences on how basically bring new ideas and new products to the market. So this is the thing with the product manufacturer is that through this product development firm, we have been having access to projects that are bigger than us. One of them being Tovala. So Tovala is this startup from Chicago that came to us because they wanted, a little prototype to show off to their investors. Well, it turns out this company now, took one of our partners out of the company. There's the CTO of Tovala now. This guy is raising Series A now, $50 million raise, and as I said, in Chicago. What they do is, this is a smart oven. The cool thing about this is not that the fact that it's smart, but it's the fact that they took an oven, a technology that any restaurants uses right now. It's a combi oven, so it does steam, bake, and broil, and usually sits in the back of the restaurant where a chef is trained to use it. And some of the food that you eat in these fancy restaurants, they're made in there. They're not like actually freshly prepared, but it's it cooks amazingly well. So what they did, they took this technology and like shrunk it down to a countertop unit. And the training part that goes along with it, instead of like having to send somebody to a class, which is what happens right now, you get an app. So this is actually an IoT product. It's a smart oven that comes with a meal plan. That's the other part of it. What you do is like, you subscribe to these meals that come uncooked, raw, and then you scan it. So you scan it in the oven, and then 12 to 15 minutes later, you get amazing quality, restaurant quality food. So this is, again, this is one of those technologies where like it was there, it existed. Now it's in everybody's hands, and check them out. Pretty cool product, launched out of the product manufactory. And there's another one that I've actually personally I got involved. This was a client of ours at the product manufactory, and then 2 years later, when the company wasn't doing so well, I stepped in and actually took it over as a CEO, rebuilt it from the ground up, and then ended up selling it to Scott's Miracle-Gro last year. What the product is, it's a sensor. It's a wireless moisture sensor that you insert in the soil, and it comes with an app. It's an IoT product. And depending on the type of plant you have and soil type, it knows when the plant needs watered. So you get little SMS messages telling you to water your plants, or you can have a watering valve that checks on the weather and checks on the sensor, and it automatically waters your plants when they need to. So there's a little bit of background about myself and a couple of highlights of the projects I've been working on. Thank you, and looking forward to some of your questions.
Okay, next I'd like to invite Meg Green. She's an experienced architect at Pillar Technology in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we just had a conversation upstairs about what is an experienced architect. It causes a lot of confusion. So essentially she designs the journey or experience of the user of a product or a service. I'll let her elaborate.
That's me. Hi, I'm Meg Green, and I use they, them, theirs as my pronouns. If any of you have any questions about that, it simply means that if you were to refer me in third person instead of she, her, hers, you might use they, them, theirs. Yes, my legal name is actually Meg, and I did have a whole slide for that because of how many people misunderstand that. And it's kind of something that's part of my personality now, and some people at Pillar know me as Legally Meg. And a great friend has photoshopped my face onto the Legally Blonde poster, and I now use that at my work as my Slack ID. I am a user experience researcher. I have been newly minted with a master's degree in human-computer interaction at the University of Michigan School of Information. I have a 2014 bachelor's in secondary education and Chinese from MSU, so got 2 while I was there. As well as a fencer, gamer, and cat lover. So I began as a teacher. I studied educational psychology at MSU, and I was extremely passionate about getting into the classroom and introducing the world of Chinese language and culture to the next generation. As many teachers find out within their first year, teaching is much more difficult than simply getting children to listen. It's also about funding, and that's something that Michigan unfortunately struggles a lot in. So I realized that I needed to pivot. And I found user experience, which is surprisingly very related to educational psychology. Concepts such as show, don't tell. This is particularly true with teaching a language. So I jumped right in after my first year of teaching into a master's program, and I realized my first day there, how much I didn't know, but how much made sense about UX. It was simply things that I had taken for granted all this time, looking at a screen, but now that someone had finally written it down for me, it just clicked. And I found the dream job I was always searching for. I have worked on government projects, as well as a lot of game design projects. Glue Mobile, with them I helped launch Nicki Minaj The Empire, which you can download on the App Store if you're into games that are similar to Kim Kardashian, gossipy story games. They're for a specific demographic, definitely was not originally intended for me, but while working on them, I realized that they were just very fun to get my gossip need without actually gossiping. I also worked with electronic arts in a couple of projects. Those were extremely fun, and I got to meet a lot of people within the game industry who opened my eyes as to what UX looks like within games. I have gone to multiple conferences on games user research as well as GDC, and I was able to learn from some of the best people who are designing and researching for games, such as people who work for BioWare in Montreal, people who create games that you play every day, such as Halo, Destiny, Mass Effect. These are the things that I dreamed of as a kid, and going to U of M made those dreams come true. And I'm still able to actually talk and muse with them about what it means to be a user researcher in games, because it's a lot different than being on the engineer side, which is what people typically think of when they think of game design and game creation. I also worked with Michigan Legal Help, an online legal self-help website, helping to redesign their website with their architecture, which basically means it was very cluttered, and I helped them find out methods to declutter it so that people could answer their legal needs. Vector Form was my internship, and with them I helped design their virtual reality product with DTE. And The Origin was the first project I worked on, which was a successfully funded Kickstarter. So this is a game that you can also buy in the App Store. If any of you are familiar with Mafia or One Night Ultimate Werewolf, this is a game akin to those. It's located in one room, so you get a group of 6 to 8 friends. You spend the first game figuring out how to play it, and then you play the next 4 games yelling at your friends because they're the traitor, and they're obviously the traitor because they killed you last time, so how could you trust them again? So these are some of the fun things I've worked on, and they've been extremely diverse. So they've given me a unique look as to what product design, what UX research looks like in the field of a variety of fields. Also, those are my cats. They're very important to me. On the right, with his eye peeking out, oh, left, great, is Winston, and he's my little angel. He could never do anything wrong. And that's said with sincerity. And on the right is Leonardo, and he likes to jump into trash cans.
We did say we'd sneak into a discussion about cats for this. Next, we'll have Malcolm McCullough. He's a professor of architecture at the University of Michigan. He teaches in architecture and in new media. His research focuses on the role of technology in everyday things and networks.
Hello, everybody, and hi, those of you out there doing this asynchronously while you're washing your dishes. I guess I'm the representative tonight from Life Before GAFAM. Do you know that acronym? Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and charitably, Microsoft. I'm back from when there was considerable advantage in knowing things yourself. And I've always driven a stick, and my kids started out driving on a stick this summer. And I have never ridden in an autonomous vehicle, and I know that autonomous vehicles are the numero uno prevailing techno-utopian future of Metro Detroit, Perhaps some people in this room are working on them, and maybe that's necessary. I don't know. What else is going to get people to stop gunning those 5.6-liter Hemis up to the red light? So I'm not against automatic vehicles. I won't knock them till I've tried them, but I am against automatic transmission. I come from the architecture school on the other side of the region. There's our new building and our new dean. And I have been a professor of architecture all my days. I'm an academic. I do this old-fashioned thing called books. And I believe that long-form reading still has a place in life, particularly if you cling somehow to the belief that you ought to know anything yourself. I'm currently working on a book on smart grid, working title Downtime on the Microgrid. And geez, downtime in the world of electricity just got real topical. I better rush. But let me highlight a work from nearly a quarter century ago, the one that's popped up there in that image, which has to do with the notion of craft. The idea of digital craft was an absolute oxymoron a quarter century ago when everybody knew the purpose of technology was automation. Oh, right. The notion that technology would be put to use to affirm one's humanity and to find the personal worth of work, that was weird, and it stuck. And in fact, the idea not only has held up, but has become a basis of many happy life's work and an occasional curriculum. And it's very tragic for me because ever since then, I really have not been in a position where just getting lost in the work was what I got to do. I feel like whatever mythical character that had to go back and show the way and then got lost. We do have a rather large mainstream effort over at the architecture school on the other side of the region of giving each and every person a taste of digital fabrication. This is a page of slides from the undergrad course that Carl Dobman made me teach. And from that world, the notion of inclusion that I would care to provide is a little bit different. I forgot to say about GAFM that, hey, technology is totally very inclusive already. GAFM will gladly monetize your every communication stream and maybe even mine your every keystroke. It doesn't matter who you are, anyone, everyone, they're inclusive, all right. But I would rather dwell on a more positive aspect of inclusive technology tonight that I think has been around in the world of crafts since time immemorial. This is something of an anthropological notion. I'm an amateur everything, an anthropologist is one of them. Communities of practice. I don't know if I have a cursor here. I do. If you could just peruse this sector of this rather large and catch-all concept map of the world that I live and work in, I think it begins to say it. Inclusiveness comes from an appreciation of the levels of conscious and unconscious competence and incompetence, and the sharing of tacit knowledge and the sharing of the means as well. And communities of practice exist for reasons beyond and before the stuff that they turn out. And I think that communities of practice, how can I say, are more important in the schools than people know. So that's what I came here to talk about tonight. But I'm all ears about talking to plants, for instance. I like that one.
Our fourth panelist is Julie Bateman. She's the Director of Operations at Vayu, Inc., which is a Michigan-based technology company that developed a unique drone that delivers healthcare to rural Madagascar.
So that's our company's logo. That's Vayu, Inc. And like Lillian said, we're based in Michigan, and we're a company that produces a healthcare delivery drone. And we do this because 1 billion people globally lack access to all-weather roads. And this number is really important because those are individuals that lack access to basic healthcare goods, essential medicines, lab samples for diagnosis, vaccines to inoculate, against diseases that we don't have in the developed world. And 3 years ago, this company was launched because there's a great need by healthcare organizations to address this challenge of we're not reaching those people that live at the last mile. And we're not reaching them because it's expensive and it's difficult. It's hard to travel on roads that are largely made out of dirt, or travel across like a river and then another road and then an additional river just to reach these last populations. And so probably like 3 or 4 years ago, the founder of our company started looking at the commercial drone market. And what he found was interesting is there was a lot of drones being developed for, say, like aerial photography or for engineering surveying. But what wasn't yet being developed was a drone that would meet some of these healthcare challenges that are still unaddressed and can be solved by this technology. And I think that's what we focus most every day at Vayu on, is these are very solvable problems. And so we're not a particularly large company. We have 10 people, largely engineers and manufacturers. We build the entire drone in-house out of composite materials. We have our software engineers that come from all over the world to contribute to this project. And just a year ago, like Lillian mentioned, we started working in Madagascar. And right now, as mentioning to the team earlier, is where we're starting to expand to more countries, because this challenge of last mile healthcare delivery and what we produce, this long-range autonomous vehicle, is present in most low and middle income countries. And what we have focused on is really 4 objectives from the very beginning of founding our company. And the first of those is that we build a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And what this enables us to do is to take off and land at any location without a runway or a launcher. I always have to back up because I spend like 24 hours thinking about drones and understanding the different types that are out there. But I guess what I want to emphasize for healthcare delivery drones is there's a few different ones on the market. I don't know if has anyone seen like a DJI Phantom? Yes, one person. They're basically like a small vehicle like this. People use them to film like weddings. There's 4 motors on them. They have extremely short range. They can go up in the air for about 20 minutes, and then they come back down. You get cool imagery. Some people use them while they're snowboarding to follow them. But for last mile healthcare delivery, it doesn't achieve what we need it to because it doesn't have the range. The battery gets drained very quickly. But it does have this capability of vertical takeoff and landing. And so that gets us to the next part, which is the range. And so we knew early on that we were going to try to solve a very technically challenging problem of we wanted to essentially take a quadcopter, which has 4 motors, and put wings on top. Because the way that you are able to go long distances is the efficiency of forward flight. That's why like all the airplanes that you guys go on, every single trip that you take that's far away, is with a fixed wing aircraft and not, say, like a helicopter. And so with fixed wing flight, we're able to achieve a distance of 10 times that of a regular quadcopter. And this is critical for the organizations that we work with. This particular map is a zoomed in version of Papua New Guinea, which is a country in Oceania that has an enormous challenge with tuberculosis diagnosis and treatment. Tuberculosis is largely a disease of the developing country. It's treatable, it's a solvable problem, but the reality is, in Papua New Guinea, it's too challenging to reach the people to diagnose them with the disease and then to provide treatment. And the reason that an international organization like Doctors Without Borders works there, and the reason why like USAID or World Health Organization contributes to this sort of effort is tuberculosis isn't just in Papua New Guinea, because we live in a very globalized world. Diseases travel by airplane, and when tuberculosis is partially treated or left untreated, it develops into drug-resistant tuberculosis. And then in even worse forms, it develops into extra drug-resistant tuberculosis. And that's why we've been developing a project to work in Papua New Guinea for transport of lab samples for TB. And then the next thing, and I think this gets into, I know Malcolm was mentioning the autonomous vehicles. So ours is an autonomous drone. Anyone in this audience could operate our vehicle. I can operate a vehicle. I am an engineer, but a civil engineer, so it's not particularly relevant. And what we have is essentially an app. And on that app, you're able to follow a set of automated pre-flight checks, and you can launch a vehicle and send it 100 kilometers away to deliver whatever it is that you would like to deliver. The ones that have been in the news more recently are like burritos and pizza, but our main focus is a bit more baseline, the essential medicines and lab samples. And then the fourth is that we wanted our vehicle to have a significant payload. And the reality is 2 kilograms isn't a lot when you're talking about healthcare supply chain. There's a lot of things that we can't carry because we're limited in payload. But I think this is kind of an interesting question of technology is, there's what the market needs and demands, and then there's the physical, parameters that you need to be constrained to. For us, that constraint is largely regulatory. It's really hard to get permissions to fly a drone that's greater than 25 kilograms, which I was trying to do the math for pounds. I don't know, somewhere around 55 pounds. And so right now we're focused on small goods, blood units. This is for critical delivery of when a woman is having difficulty during childbirth, to be able to rapidly deliver blood for a transfusion. Vaccines. Vaccines are particularly challenging in rural areas because it requires cold chain. If those vaccines are left unrefrigerated at any point, they expire and are dangerous to whoever gets administered them. Antivenom, if you're hiking somewhere and you get bitten by a snake, it would be super nice if a drone was able to deliver you an antivenom. Lab samples is actually the bulk of our business right now. I would say about 80% of the projects that we're very actively pursuing are for delivery of lab samples, and particularly for delivery of lab samples for diagnosis of HIV. United States government and a lot of European governments are still very focused on eliminating HIV in the developing world. Most of the countries we work in, 15% of the adult population has HIV. And so there's still a lot of work to be done, and the backbone of that work is getting people diagnosed so that they can start treatment. And then oxytocin is actually also for controlling bleeding, and it has to be refrigerated. And so this is final slide. I apologize if I went over for 5 minutes. And we do all of our flight testing here in Michigan. So that's what our technology is. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to start the conversation thinking broadly, but also critically, about using technology for good. So sometimes we have the tendency to see the advantage of change rather than having the wisdom to predict disadvantages or consequences. So can you speak, this is a question for everybody, about your experience with striving for technological innovations that will in fact have a positive role in society rather than create more problems? Or how does this factor into the design process or research? We're starting with a toughie. I have some easier ones.
I think it relates a lot to, with every project, I start on with research, because that's what I specialize in, and I realize that I can't really turn my head unless I actually turn around like this. With that in mind, all the projects that I've been on begin with that I don't know what I don't know. There's always going to be edge cases that something could be used for that might not accomplish what I'm hoping to accomplish. But despite that, that's what I go and research for, to help protect from those edge cases. In addition, my own personal experience has been with a lot of healthcare apps, and I have a lot of feelings on those at the moment. Because those can help my doctors a lot, know how to treat me. Some of you guys might have heard beeping at some times, and you might hear more. It's from a diabetic app that I have that tells me if I'm too high or if I'm too low. But at the same time, healthcare apps where doctors can monitor your health can also make patients less willing to use them. Especially as a diabetic, when I was younger, it was assumed that I was simply eating too much candy, that I wasn't taking care of myself in the way that I should have, and doctors were a lot tougher on me. And if you were to give me an app then and told me you can take better care of your diabetes by having this app where this doctor can monitor your blood sugars, I would have refused it outright because I was scared. So we have some potential always to help, but always realizing what the user's true needs are, whether that's doctor intervention or simply teaching them themselves how to monitor and take care of their diabetes, from realizing this works, this doesn't, rather than feeling like they're under constant investigation as to why isn't your blood sugars in the correct range at the time. Of course, that's a very small example, but that's a personal example.
Next, well, almost everybody I know tries to do good. You know people who don't? I guess there are certain big pharma executives. More specifically, in the world of design education, I think that the main message is to uphold personal knowledge and the love of practice, and none of this look ma, no hands kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I started with the company when we didn't use the word drone anymore, because drone usually has a very military connotation. And I think it's something that our company is very cognizant of, that we're very clear with our message about what we're delivering or what we're developing a drone for. One of, I think, the big challenges that we run into for ourselves is we work in developing countries where, and actually in almost every country in the world right now, we have to get special permission from regulatory authorities, ministries of defense, to use our technology. And generally we're going to places where people have never used computers or laptops. And so you can imagine how frightening it would be if there's suddenly a small aircraft flying over your community when you aren't used to seeing those things. And so I think our company spends a lot of time thinking about how we can use this technology for good, and even more importantly, how we can make sure from the beginning that people understand, why this technology is being developed, and why we're proposing its use in different areas.
Yeah, so we obviously doing a lot of product development. We get to see a lot of ideas that seem initially very superficial. Hearing your plants talk, it seems very, why would you do that? Put your finger in the dirt and you'll know if the plant needs water. But if you step back just a second and you realize that, we have a water scarcity in the world. Crops need water. Crops are our livelihood. So you can see where technology like PlantLink can very easily start scaling up to rural areas, very desert areas where making sure that you're using the bare minimum to grow your crops. It's very important. Not only that, but with the fact that now it's an IoT product, and IoT being if drone is a hot word, IoT is probably just as hot in today's world, and everything is IoT, everything is connected. But it is that connectiveness is the fact that now you can monitor weather, you can monitor weather patterns, and you can get the data and capture that and analyze it across the planet and seeing what's happening and where things are trending. It's at least for us, it's like when we look at your product, it's always with that vision, and it's like, this is cool, this is a nice, little gadget, but how is this going to impact the world? How is this going to be, affecting, millions or billions of people? So for PlantLink, at least, that was our mission, and we're able to do that right now. Obviously, with Scott's Miracle-Gro being such a big company, such a big brand, they're going to do that. They're going to start using the technology and deploying it for more than just your house plants. And even that Tovala company that I talked about, it's it's a smart oven in your home. Who needs that? Well, it's people that need quality food, people with allergies, people that have to have a very, controlled diet. Now they can actually don't have to eat, the food that tastes like, fabric. You can think of like, hospitals and nursing homes. So it's for us, it's always like, this is technology for us. It's like, how can we deploy this so we can reach the biggest number of people out there in a way that it's, and everybody gets access to like the same quality every single time instead of just, marginalizing some people because of they just don't have access to it. So yeah, for us, it's always like, don't stop at like what this thing can like be right in front of you, but like, how can we scale this? How can we make this big?
Have you been able to scale PlantLink?
Yeah, kinda, yes. I mean, once we sold to Scott's, we sold last year, so now it's been, it's in the process of now of getting that, and manufacturing-wise, absolutely, has been completely scaled. Marketing-wise, yes. Now it's actually part of my role inside of Scott's right now is building partnerships to go, outside of that consumer market. So yeah.
All right, so some of the conversation is already touching on the role of empathy. And Carl Dauman, in his introduction, also touched on this as part of the design process. So designing for inclusivity requires us to think beyond ourselves and our own experiences. Can you talk about the role of empathy a little bit more as part of your projects or research?
As an educator, one way I try to invite people to think beyond themselves is to stop using the word we. Because there are so many different ways and peoples and practices out there, and it's not, there's more empathy to imagine that there are others out there who do not have the same issues, do not speak the same language, do not even listen to NPR, right, and who do not feel compelled to share their every moment online. It's in many ways it's the opposite of inclusiveness, though, right? But I think that it's more empathy actually results if you can begin to imagine something other than a hive mind where all the memes propagate in nanoseconds. That there's more difference out there. That's me.
Yeah, I can say something. So, I'm an engineer by training, and we are known for not being empathic. For me, it was it was a learning. I mean, I am not very empathic, but I work closely with designers. I totally understand their value. I think it's very important. I think I learned very early on that if I needed to do product development for people, I needed to understand and give the right importance to that part of the design process. And for us, it's like we don't do anything unless there's designers or we start ourselves. Everybody that's working on the project start not saying like this is what I would do, because we are a very very small slice of who we're designing for, and it's challenging though. It is really challenging. It's very easy to say, well, but this doesn't apply to me. This is not how I do it. And then it's having constantly to go back and like recheck your assumptions. I think it's not easy, and I think it's very important. And for me, still, it's for all of my team, I guess it's a learning. It's still an ongoing learning process because it's really hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, I think UX has something called personas, which I think can be a double-edged sword, because you're supposed to create them after interviews and on-site observations of who you're actually designing for. But at the same time, these personas you create are ultimately fictional, and sometimes people can rely on them too much, rather than going out and actually asking someone who's going to touch the product that you're creating what they think. And of course, that too is a double-edged sword, because that's just a small population that you can ask, who has access to the survey, who has access to the time to meet with you, and how many people do you in reality get to touch. But I think what you said, Malcolm, was very true about stop using the word we. It's very tempting to say, well, I would use this in this way. But especially the government projects that I'm working on have really shown me that it just goes with the amount of people that these projects can touch. Even the 15 personas that we have, which is just a ballpark fake number that I have, don't even truly start to encapsulate the amount of people who will be affected. So it really just takes so much time and dedication to be able to continuously go out and find new people to talk to, because you can try to take someone else's shoes and within that imaginary person you've created, but that won't be nearly as valuable as having empathy of actually talking to that person that you'll be impacting, actually seeing how they struggle every day with this problem that you're trying to fix, and that will truly make you feel for them. And I think once you start to have that personal feeling side that you really want to help them, that's where the empathy starts.
Or there's empathy with plants, right?
I feel really bad when I come.
There's a lot of empathy with plants.
I mean, a grower who is depending on the results in order to eat would definitely need to be mindful of their watering schedule. But those of us who are really old and do gardening just for therapy take pride, or at least consolation, in developing some empathy with those plants and knowing when they need to be watered. Having a technology tell me when my plants need to water, I might as well water them, right? In which case, I don't need the garden anymore. Similar back to the cars. Okay, maybe there's going to be a car that does my driving for me. I just hope nobody comes up with a machine to eat my dinner for me.
What if you could still taste it?
Oh, yeah. True. Go on.
What are your needs?
I'm gonna go back to the empathy and inclusive technology question, and I think one of the things that comes up for our company like more now, and because we're in a like the drone startup space, is actually it's kind of like a cutthroat, brutal location to be, because you're competing for a limited number of funds. Amazon is currently making a drone that's similar to ours, which isn't it's cool because we're like, oh, we are designing the right thing, but they're also a very large company. And I think one of the things that we've learned as a startup is that empathy can actually start with the product development process. And it's not just that you're designing with empathy for other people, but that you're creating a team that's also empathetic towards one another. And I think it's very hard to create technologies that are going to, impact, say like health comes better, or do good in a certain way, if you're not actually building that culture within your company to treat each other with respect. And when the question was read, something that was coming to mind was there's a good book called Development for Freedom. I think it's what it's called. It's Amartya Sen. He's a famous economics writer. And one of the things he writes that I think kind of resonates with this process of developing a new technology is there's the culmination of what you're working on, and there's the cumulative process and the comprehensive process. And the culmination is only focused on what's the end product. Like, I have this drone that flies 100 kilometers, but I think what should be addressed in product development is how did you get there? How did you work with the engineers? How did you treat them? Did you respect each of those individuals as you were developing that product? And I think, as the space gets more competitive, it's interesting to focus on that, to make sure that we're not just, developing products that are empathetic towards people at the end of the line, but that we're actually creating a workforce that's empathetic towards, the way that we're producing those things.
And Julie, you just mentioned Amazon, a huge company, versus your startup. So my next question is about the technological tools becoming more democratized, allowing smaller teams or individuals to have increasing ability to innovate in ways that have a great impact on society. So this is a question again for everybody, but if you could talk a little bit about some experience you might have in a smaller team and having the tools at your fingertips or just a little bit beyond to actually make the change.
How many people in this room use Slack? for instance?
Love Slack.
Just asking. Is that democratic? Does it feel like it democratizes your work?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we use Slack, like I have like, I don't know, plenty of channels. Like plenty of teams with multiple channels, and we use it all the time, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's a great tool. It feels very collaborative. Obviously, nothing beats, face-to-face, don't get me wrong, but it's a nice tool. It's a good way to, expand or limit your team. Going back to your question about small team, big teams, I like working in small teams. I really like that intimacy and trying to get to know your teammates and get to see them at their high or their lows, and really, when you start clicking and really, what the person is thinking just by looking at them. I think that's when you start really, as she was saying, you start getting some really good products out. Obviously access to the tool and easy access to tools and technology makes that possible, because now you don't need like a 200 team to achieve something. You can do it with like a team of 5 or 7 because the tools are that much better. So I think that's something that obviously technology has allowed us to do. Yeah.
So I'm going to mix in a couple of questions from the audience. If anybody has any other questions filled out on their card. Actually, okay.
Paper planes would be preferred.
Yes, you may.
I think one question that relates to our topic is the role of regulation in advancement of technology. There have been many instances, and some of you know and some I do, where some technology made for good has actually turned around and been very devastating for people and environment. A lot of pharmaceuticals, oil companies help you run a car on the gasoline but destroy areas and countries. Politically speaking, this is not the intention of my question. Some political parties are advancing less regulation, let everybody be free, entrepreneur, and do whatever you want. And others are saying, well, we want that, but we need to regulate how far you can go and what are the implications of the technology. I think that's a very serious issue in my view, having thought about both sides of it, freedom and regulation.
And because a lot of companies, including the one that I've been involved in, security is the last thing in your mind. You just want to ship your product, test it, and then you end up seeing cases like a few years ago with the baby cameras where there was like a huge breach. It's one of those things that it's obviously regulation is good, but we know that regulation a lot of time hinders innovation. And if we knew today what environmental impact the gasoline engine would have had, maybe we wouldn't have airplanes, we wouldn't have cars, we would still be, riding, I don't know, donkeys or whatever else. So I think it's good to think ahead, but over-regulating something because if you think of like every possible worst-case scenario, I also don't think that's the right way to approach things, because it will slow down a lot of things, or something might never, actually happen because we saw the worst case scenario and that's where we went, and decided to stop it. I don't think I have, an answer that says at what point you stop. I think through education and making everybody self-aware that develops and themselves take the responsibility to start thinking a little bit ahead and saying, what are the implications of this technology? Where are the weak points? And trying to at least address some of them or predict them and have milestones where you can start, fixing those issues along the way. Maybe that's one way to do it. I think, I want regulations, but I don't want it to the point where they hinder innovation. I think we don't win that way. That's not a good position to be in either. So I'm going to go back to saying, give a little bit of responsibility to the inventors themselves to start thinking and not letting it to the regulators to take charge.
And of course, depends on what field you're designing for. The Food and Drug Administration exists for a reason, and I'm sure that might have had an effect on the oven, perhaps, as well as apps that I use for diabetes. And Though sometimes I'm very frustrated by the fact that there's technology I could use. In the end, I don't want to put my life in the hands of something that might kill me because it wasn't regulated enough. But in other fields, perhaps there could be less, but I don't know enough about those at the moment.
It's a difficult question in a time of prevention all out of proportion with risk. Let me give a simple example. Has anybody in the room ever been to Amsterdam? There's canals, right, but there are no railings, and yet nobody falls in. And if they do, they sure hope nobody saw that. Whereas where I work, every year somebody comes around and installs more exit lights. So it's a difficult question about regulation. And a lot of things happen just by default. For example, my university rolled out a new version of its courseware, which is called Canvas, which now can monitor how much time each student has spent on a particular course site. Because, hey, technically possible. No conversation was raised about, is this ethical? Is that even a regulation question? I don't know. It's a difficult question.
Yeah, it sounds like from the panel, I think what's important for the regulation question is what field are we talking about, what sector, and how is it going to affect individuals' lives? And I think some of the onus is on, the businesses and inventors to understand what could be the unintended consequences. I think we're living right now in, one of the most challenging epidemics for our country, the opioid crisis. And so this is, of course, like outside of, the drone world, but it really could have been predicted in some ways that painkillers would have this effect on individuals. And if we had had better regulations in the 1990s to predict that and not overprescribed, we might be in a different place right now. I know from drone industries, I didn't have an aviation background. The aviation industry is entirely driven by regulations because every time a person goes up in an airplane, you want to feel safe. You want to know that certain pre-flight checks were done, that the center of gravity is checked on the aircraft. We work in an airport hangar that the airline went out of business because they backloaded the aircraft, and when it took off, it didn't finish taking off, and it tail dived into the ground. And now we have their office space, which is a good place. But I mean, our company has a love-hate relationship. I spent my last 4 weeks basically going to 3 countries in Southeast Africa to get special permission to fly our drones and to demonstrate to them that this is a safe technology, that there's compelling health reasons to use this technology because it will, help people get diagnosed for HIV and get on treatment sooner. But our company is extremely conscious of, having safe, reliable flights so that we can operate safely in someone's airspace because, a failure for our drone is actually a failure for any of this healthcare delivery drone industry because we're a young industry. And I think we have huge respect for the civil aviation authorities that we work with in those countries because they're trying to incorporate a new technology into their airspace. And I think at least for drone world, regulations have a really important space for keeping this technology safe.
Probably the most important set of regulations in play at the moment is net neutrality. Do you know anyone who is against net neutrality regulations? And yet those are being dismantled in a backroom deal in Washington this very week from the sound of it. You could follow something like freepress.net to find out. And yet it is the same Silicon Valley that prides itself on being so techno-libertarian that brought the internet to such prominence, to where it became not just a common carrier, but a necessity for all other kinds of democracy and civil discourse and startup companies and educational recruitment and you name it. So it's hard to imagine a world in which those regulations should go away. They seem better than having still more fire exit signs.
I have a question from the audience that relates to user experience, so I'm going to direct this to Meg to begin with. Assuming you test products on users before the final is produced, how much time do you allow for that? And what's the process of incorporating their feedback?
My question would be, well, I always answer these sort of questions with what's the context? Who am I creating it for? Is this one of my government projects or is this a game? When do we need to ship is also another question that I have, because at the end of the day, the product needs to ship. So these are sort of things that I keep in mind all the time when I look up how I should make my timeline. A lot of times I begin immediately with research as to who my users are, and then as fast as I can, I try to get in contact with those users, whether that's in survey form or by being able to talk to them in person, or even guerrilla testing, where I go to your local coffee shop and offer to buy someone coffee in return for 5 minutes of their time. This can change a lot depending on what it is. So if it's for, say, the indie game I worked on, I had, at the end of it shipping, let's see, game sessions were about 2 hours long, and I had about 18 of them. Not all of them I actually used for research purposes primarily, but they were fun. But this was a project that lasted on my end for 2 years. So 18 times 2 is the amount of time I was able to actually test this with actual people. And I'm actually pretty bad at math, and I think that's like 36 hours. Did I get it right? Yeah, I see some nods. I didn't go to math school, okay?
We have machines for that now.
Yeah, I was about to open up my calculator thinking about you in my head going, you should just know something. Meanwhile, with a project that you might work with the government, you have a lot longer of a timeline. And you need to build those relationships not only with the people using your product, but also the public. And you do that for repeatedly over a process of what I expect to be anywhere from 2 years to 10 years, depending on how big your project is. And that's going to be at least every other week, having a few hours out of your day simply to be able to talk with those people. These are long-term commitments that you make, because this is something that's going to impact citizens, as well as people who work for the government. This is going to impact people's lives very directly, so you want to make sure that whatever happens, if anything does go wrong, and if there is an edge case, you can prepare for that as much as you can, because this is a big risk, but that's also what makes it exciting for me.
Okay, another question from the audience. This is for Mercedes. You showed companies that are diverse, like Whirlpool and P&G. Do you have ideas to offer market to them, or do they have ideas that they seek you out for developing? So the bottom line, the ultimate question is, where do your ideas, concepts, or developments originate?
So for those big companies, actually, we work with their R&D groups. So a lot of times they have their ideas already, they have a concept that they're trying to, take it to the next level. So when they engage with us, it's, they just need, depending on like they're so different, as I said, but sometimes they do really like come with, look, we have this unit, we're trying to figure out how the user should open it and close it. How should they open and close this lid? I mean, considering that it's, it's an appliance, they're gonna be doing things. So it's this particular project, actually I can talk about it now because the project is public. It's Zira. It's a composter, at-home composter, where you take all your food waste, you put them in this bin, and like a couple of days later you have fertilizer you can just put in your garden. It's really incredible. So they came to us, and what they wanted was actually UX design. They're like, we have this unit now, how do we make it so the user can operate this when they're cooking, when their hands are dirty, where they're like, but without making this, obviously, making it dangerous for them or unusable. So in that case, they needed one particular thing, and we basically spent months developing like systems on how to like open and close the lid of this thing. Seriously, it was ridiculous. I mean, we had so many models and so many tests, and then ultimately, they picked something. None of those was something in between all of them. So There's other projects where other times they'll just come with, they have a technology. They're like, we have this cool technology, and this is for Molex, where it's an LED lighting. It's like, it's pretty cool. Like, we need the product. We need to build a product around this, because otherwise it's going to go nowhere. So in that case, we took their technology and we built like a lamp that it's with magnetic lighting and everything. So in that case, it's like technology. We build a consumer product around it. And a lot of times it's just, like startups especially, they have the idea what they want. They are trying to validate, get the product, get the minimum viable product to test the market and say, I want to either put it on Kickstarter, I want to show my investors, I want to give it to 50 people to test it. So in that case, it's, we're actually, taking their concept. Sometimes it's just like very early on prototypes, so we actually make them, a little bit more polished and usable. And then they take them and do their thing, and then sometimes they just go away, they're done with us at least, they can move on to the next stage, or they come back and we take it to the next step, which is sometimes manufacturing. So it's, the ideas come from different places and the different stages of the product development. What we prefer is to get right there, right in the beginning, and then see them all the way through manufacturing, but obviously that's not always the case.
We're just about out of time, but I have a really great question from the audience that I'd like to end with. Inclusivity seems linked to access, so physical or intellectual access. And current infrastructures that support access seem inadequate or biased. So for example, 1 million people without access to all-weather roads, relatively modest number of people with access to the internet, means of supposedly democratic production, situation in Puerto Rico. How can technology overcome these inadequacies and permit greater access and inclusivity?
Didn't President 44, remember him, say just last night that there has never been such prosperity, never been such health, never been so little violence in the world? It's far from perfect, but something's working.
I don't think I'm ever happy with it's better than it was before. This is, even looking around at this room where a wheelchair user would not be able to get down to this. This is something that is not just technology that we use in an app. This is not just making sure that screen readers can navigate a website, not just making sure that people can simply even have that internet access to open up your app that you might hope to change the world with. This is things that we see every day that we are simply blind to, because most of us here are able-bodied, and most of us here are privileged to be able to be educated, at least at a university level. So already we are part of the group that does not always immediately see and immediately empathize with those needs to open access to more people, to treat those who really are most at need for what we're creating. Better isn't good enough for me.
I think this is a really good question to end with, and I just wanted to quickly correct that there's an additional 999 million people that don't have access to roads. It's 1 billion. It's a huge number that lack access to the basic services that we're used to.
Same for electricity, by the way.
Yeah, electricity, if you look at those maps, like the satellite images. But I think what is really interesting about what can technology do is technology's designed to take a certain resource and stretch it further to make something be used efficiently. What we always sought for, say, when we were developing cars, is we want to use less gasoline to go farther. Now we want to use lighter batteries to operate an electric vehicle for a farther distance. And I think technology's role is that I think there's a reality right now in the world where we do have abundance, but we have this situation where there's abundance that's not shared in a way that eliminates poverty. And I think technology's role is to find the the means to solve that, that equation, because we have enough fresh water, we have enough food, we certainly have enough educated people to, share their knowledge with people right now that, lack basic education. And I think one of the, at least from our company's perspective, I think one of the challenges that we face right now is there's maybe a lot of focus on technology for developing, more efficient, more convenient services for the developed world. And I think the more time that gets spent realizing like challenges in developing countries, I mean, countries right now where it's very difficult even to like pay for goods because you don't use credit cards, you don't, some of the population doesn't have cell phones, so you can't use like your, Venmo or similar things that they, have in like Kenya. Kenya actually has a ton of traction with mobile money, but I think the like really interesting market to look for, and the way that we start to spread this abundance more evenly is developing, the tools for, those communities to better access like healthcare, clean water, housing, education.
Yeah, I actually want a quick example. I'll be very quick. I mean, technology, it's great, of course, and it's making our lives better. And there is, I feel like there is a place and time for the technology to come in. Giving Facebook to a kid in Honduras who doesn't have clean water, it makes absolutely zero sense. So it's, but giving them, first of all, that clean water so they can actually, live through the age of 5 without, going through all the different diseases that don't even exist in our world anymore. It's a basic, health, and then education, so that, when the technology like Facebook is introduced to them, they're actually able to, on their own, be able to take advantage of it and be able to use it in their society as well. So I just want to say that technology is great and everything, but we need to first make sure that people can live to take advantage of it. And there's a lot of parts of the world that don't have that, and we just cannot forget that, and we can't just build for the 1%er in here.
Well, thank you so much. I probably share this sentiment with the rest of you in that I would love to hear more from you for another hour or two even, but unfortunately we're out of time. I'd like to thank Mercedes, Meg, Malcolm, and Julie for your thoughtful contribution to this discussion, and then also the audience for your time and your engagement with the discussion through your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine.